This is ContraZoom,
where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho. This week we continue with our A24 Retrospective looking at 2013's Locke starring Tom Hardy, one of my personal favorites in the A24 catalog. Be sure to check out our last episode in the series, episode 194, where we discussed Underneath the Skin with Callum McNabb of the Scare-Traducing podcast. For this week's episode, we're joined by Thomas Stoneham Judge. Thomas is a Rotten Tomatoes approved film critic based out of Seattle and the founder and editor-in-chief For Real, a fantastic website with great reviews, interesting interviews with filmmakers, and one that I actually do genuinely visit quite often. So thanks so much for joining us, Thomas. How are you doing?
I'm flattered. I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
I do genuinely. I really like your interviews. I watch them. Yeah. I like your interviews.
Thank you. Okay, great. Now I feel so ready for this now.
And Thomas's response is, I don't even know what podcast I'm on.
Who are you guys again?
Who are you?
Who's this? I've always wanted to ask you, Thomas, like when you're interviewing people, are you in like a log cabin?
You know what? This has come up a couple times off the record with with some of the interviewees I've had. So this is what I call my studio. But some people have actually said like, "Oh, you must be in a sauna," which I think is a very weird place to live.
Yeah, it kind of looks like one, though.
It does, right? So this is my. It's a shed that I'm purposing as a studio. I did not do the interior design here. It came with the house, and this is just the space that I have. I do need to do some redecorating. And if you're curious what she's talking about, you can always go to thisisforreal.com and find one of my interviews. It is almost guaranteed to be the background is just this like wood paneling that looks very sauna-esque. And I guess I have my heater in here. Even if it's warm out, I still keep it on because I guess I'm somewhat of a reptile. So maybe it is a sauna. I don't know.
I just figured it was like a log cabin out in like the Pacific Northwest, like you PNW people. I figured you guys all had log cabins.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Not joking. Our house is kind of log cabin. It's definitely. So this is the shed outside of the house. But if you were to see the house, it definitely looks like a log cabin, and I love every bit of it.
That's amazing. I like that I was partly right. Like it is log cabin. Like that's funny. Dakota, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad that we can finally have Thomas on here. We've been kind of circling each other for the last little while, and so it's nice to actually have a real conversation. I think you sent in a voicemail before. Am I remembering that correctly, Thomas?
Yes. I think this was a part of the podcast where you looked back over what favorite films of last year, and I sent a voicemail about the one and only Flea.
Exactly,
because I can't go on the record apparently without mentioning Flea, so we're just going to keep that trend up. In respect of the loss of Oscars that movie suffered during the Oscars.
I was incredibly disappointed. I was so sure it was going to take something. Like I was anyways.
3 nominations.
We don't need to get into this.
I digress.
All right, so we're going to be talking about Locke in depth, but of course, before we do that, we're going to ask Thomas our A24 4 questions. I think we're still sticking with that title. Is that correct, Dakota?
Yes.
Yep. So here we go. So we've had every guest that we've had on for this series answer these 4 questions, and I am very excited to hear Thomas's answers. He's already told us that he's going to be bending the rules just a little bit. So let's see where we go with this.
Yeah.
All right, so the first question, Thomas, what are your top 3 A24 films?
Okay. So there's if y'all didn't know, there's a lot of A24 films. And so looking through the list and kind of remembering which ones I've seen, which ones I really liked, and trying to organize this list was a challenge. It took me a couple days. And so what I'll start with is an honorable mention, which is The Death of Dick Long. I saw that one at the Seattle Film Festival, and this was one of those films that I walked into not really knowing anything. And if you've seen The Death of Dick Long, there's it takes some very interesting turns that I was not expecting. And I think that shock value, and where it ends up with the story just made it a very wonderful, film festival experience. So their honorable mention right there is Death of Dick Long. So my official number 3, which is pretty straightforward. I am going to put Ex Machina at number 3. It's just, I mean, sci-fi, interesting development of a story and interesting twist. I also am usually really attracted to movies that have limited casts and settings. So this movie fits like right in that kind of in that subcategory for me. And so yeah, that's an interesting one that tends to come up when I think about A24. Okay, number 2 is bending the rules a little bit. And instead of mentioning one film, this is going to be kind of a subcategory, of A24, and that is Robert Egert's films, The Lighthouse and The Witch. So I'm just kind of lump those together. I don't think he didn't do in The Northman what he did with these two movies, which I think is unfortunate, but that's also why I'm happy The Northman is not an A24 film, because then I can have this nice little subcategory. But these movies, they just have this like crawl under your skin nature to them that I greatly appreciate in both kind of period pieces, I guess, very stylistically unique, but also super compelling. And also, I mean, a little simmering kind of tension. And I love that when you can craft simmering tension in a film. I'm all about that. So anyway, number 2, Robert Egert's A24 films, Lighthouse and The Witch. And then my number 1 is also going to bend the rules in the similar way. So kind of subcategory here. And that is going to be 2022 family themed films. So that's After Yang, Marcel, The Shell with Shoes On, and Everything Everywhere All at Once.
That's amazing. I like that you chose like recent ones. Actually, that's incredible.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't stop talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once. So but good. Also, Marcel hasn't come out yet, and so I can't talk about that one a whole lot. It's kind of like one of my first on the record opportunities to like be like Marcel, The Shell with Shoes On. And then yeah, After Yang was just a really nice Sundance watch, and so they have this family theme going on there that's not not in the like thriller horror suspense thing that I typically go to A24 for. So I find it very interesting that we have so many family themed films from A24 this year.
So let me get this straight. If my math is correct, that was 7 movies for 3 slots.
Top seven of A24 movies. Yeah,
I warned you guys.
That's a good mix, though. I like that. I like that there's like some new one, because I think After Yang, like I love Everything Everywhere All at Once as well. Like I think it's, for most people, it's going to probably be on a lot of people's top 10s at the end of the year. But I like After Yang. I remember watching it and just, it was like I was like hit in the chest by After Yang. I really enjoyed that movie. But I like that you chose like the classics. You got the Robert Eggers stuff, and I agree about The Northman as well.
Yeah.
And Jeff will be very happy to hear The Death of Dick Long. He's already volunteered himself to come on the podcast for that. Jeff from Classic Movies Live.
Stole my opportunity.
Maybe we'll have both of you on for that.
Maybe, or you can choose any of the other 6 movies I just mentioned.
All right, so it's a bit of a story time. So what was your introduction to A24?
This is also a very interesting question. I didn't bend rules here. I do have an answer. And so I remember, so there's a little theater here in Bellingham called the Pickford Theater. Pickford Film Center. And I don't know why I decided to go see this film when they played it. But I think it was just Scarlett Johansson, like that name brand. I was like, oh, I like her. Well, let's go see this movie. And so I took my husband to Pickford to go see this movie, Under the Skin. And that was my introduction to A24. It was a wonderful introduction for me. Like I was just so entranced by the beguiling nature of this movie. And I loved the experience. I don't know if I'm ever going to watch it again, but it was a wonderful experience to have the first time. This was early on in me and my husband's relationship. I'm trying to think.
So you're telling the story, huh?
Time. Yeah. So, so I think he was still in kind of this like, I don't want to say people pleasing, but like he was still trying to like, do things that I was interested in. And so I don't think at the time he acknowledged how much he hated that movie.
Oh.
That's just as I know now, that's just not his thing. And I've taken him to movies that are kind of similar to it, and since then I have now learned the truth. That was not his film, and he did not like it. But I enjoyed it so much that he just kind of went with it, and that was his introduction to A24.
What didn't he like about it?
Like everything,
just not his thing, or like
it is not his thing. He needs more conventional type storytelling. And it's not that he exclusively watches like mainstream films. Like he can, there have been some movies we've watched at film festivals where he's like, oh yeah, that's not bad. But Under the Skin was one that was just too unconventional for him. I think combining that and maybe I think it was a couple years later we saw Ghost Story in Seattle. Drove all the way down to Seattle to watch that, and he drew a line there. Wow! No more of these unconventional films.
He's got
which I respect, reverse.
Yeah, it's like how like these days I've heard that people go to A24 movies and they like cheering at the logo when the logo pops up. Your husband's got like the opposite. He's just like, I'm out. We're not doing this.
Yeah, he's I think he's like learned that walking out of the movie is an option, and so anyway, I had a very pleasant introduction to A24. I can't say the same for my husband, and that's the story.
That's amazing. All right, so what director, dead or alive, would make a good A24 film?
I am very excited to answer this. I kind of went to like, okay, what movies do I like that I'm surprised aren't A24? One movie that I thought seems like right in like an A24 wheelhouse that I would appreciate is the film Upgrade. So I thought that director, I think his name is Lee Winnell. Yeah. I think he would make an interesting A24 film. I also thought about Joel Edgerton. I think that The Gift was a very interesting film that could have been under the A24 banner. But ultimately, my official answer, because apparently I'm just giving more answers than I'm asked to give. But my official answer is something that I realized recently watching TV. And I would really love to see the directorial debut of Donald Glover be an A24 film.
That is an excellent answer.
Yeah.
I think that's the best answer we've gotten for this question. That's amazing.
I thought because I've watched through Atlanta, and Atlanta is billed as a comedy drama show, and season 1 certainly fills that kind of genre. But season 2 does some very offbeat horror things that makes me think, why is this still considered a comedy? Like, there's still comedic aspects to it, but I feel like I'm watching stuff Jordan Peele would make, right?
Yeah,
like
the Teddy Perkins episode is definitely Jordan Peele-esque.
Oh, for sure. And so this like racial horror kind of thing at A24, like if you all are listening, you need to have a conversation with Donald Glover and snap him up before someone else does, because if you want to compete with Jordan Peele, horror films, I think Donald Glover is the way to go.
That's
interesting. I wonder if Donald Glover would be able to command more money for his budget than maybe A24 would be willing to do, because that's like one of the reasons why Eggers didn't do The Northman with A24 was because he wanted a bigger budget, and A24 wasn't able to do it. So I wonder if that would be something
yes.
that Donald Glover would maybe have.
I don't know if I want him to have a bigger budget. I really like these like very story driven kind of like situational
absolutely
dramas, right? So like I would argue that Eggers the bigger budget worked in his detriment in The Northman, right? So no, like give limitations, at least as a directorial debut, give some limitations, see what he can do with those limitations and make it happen. Look, I need Donald Glover to make movies.
Yeah. And if we're talking Atlanta, as much as Donald Glover's been such a creative force behind the creation and mapping of all of that, we gotta give a special shout out to Hiro Murai, who has directed all the episodes of that show too.
He does, I think, episodes of Barry as well. Like he did some in the first 3 seasons, I think, and his episodes are amazing in Barry.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal director.
Okay, yes, for sure. I need to follow whatever he does because I think I've watched the Barry. In fact, I actually rewatched seasons 1 and 2 to watch season 3. I love Barry. It's such a good show.
It's so good. I wait for them to I let them build up. Like this new season, I've been letting them build up because they're only 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been just letting them build up so I can sit there and watch them for a little bit
and
longer.
Just binge it because, like I said, I went and rewatched seasons 1 and 2 before season 3. And that was just a couple weeks ago. So it was so easy to just crank through these episodes again, and it's so entertaining.
They're such good. I love Barry. Barry's that and Better Call Saul are my 2 shows right now that I'm obsessed with. Okay, so final question, and I think your answer is going to be very interesting here, and maybe you're going to bend the rules too. I don't know how, but maybe you will. So the question is, what makes an A24 movie to you?
You know what? I had to think on this question for a long time because at first I think, because when I think of A24 films, I think of the horror, thriller, suspense kind of things. But as I mentioned, my number one A24 subcategory, I guess, are family themed films from this year. So, you can't narrow it down to genre. I don't know if there's anything thematically that they put into, or that they look for in films. I don't know. Does A24 know what makes an A24 film? I'm not sure. My official answer is not The Northman. That's I think that's a pretty firm conclusion on my part. That The Northman is not an A24 film, and I'm glad that Eagers took that elsewhere. But really, A24 spans a wide. It casts a wide net on the type of movies that it distributes, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that it's not kind of pigeonholed into a particular niche. But I think that ultimately, an A24 film is something for me that is memorable, and that can be either in a good way or a bad way or a mediocre way. Like something that I think most A24 films that I've seen, I remember having seen, and I remember when I saw them, and I remember how I felt about that. When there's a lot of films, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I did see that. What did I think about it? I should probably rewatch that. I don't know. But with A24, there is definitely an impression that A24 makes when I watch them. So.
That's a really good answer, I think, because it is a kind of an intangible quality that that they have. I like that thing of saying it's just a feeling that you have after watching their movies. It's not not necessarily something that's put you in deep thought or even makes you happy or makes you sad. It's just it leaves a mark on you somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can sort of subcategorize a bunch of their movies of they've got their, their cerebral horror movie ones, they've got their family dramas, they've got their high concept comedies, things like that. But they all definitely have a feeling that is kind of hard to replicate, which is weird considering they're half distribution company, half production company. So it's not even like they always have their hands in everything, but they know their branding well enough when they're at a film festival and they're shopping for films and being like, this is the vibe we're going for. This is what we're trying to elicit from people.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that The Northman has become a test case now, being this is exactly what happens when you don't go with A24.
When you leave the nest.
Yeah, when you're a quote unquote an indie director, if you want to call it that, and then you move to the big budget. Not everybody can make that transition and deal with the studio too, because I think that was a big part of it. Was just having it was Universal, right? I think it's a Universal movie. So it's having to deal with studio heads. Not every director is capable of, I don't mean capable in a negative way. Just it's not in everyone's wheelhouse to have to capitulate so much. And not everyone's going to be Chris Nolan and has the power to command their own decision making on film. So I actually think The Northman, as much as we're kind of making fun of it, it's just it's an interesting film to look at in his career specifically.
Yeah,
but, all right. So, thank you for that, Thomas. Yes. I really enjoyed your rule-breaking answers. That was fantastic. All right, so we're going to dive into Locke. And before we do, it's this usual warning for everyone. If you haven't seen the movie, we are going to talk about spoilers. So either be okay with the spoilers or log off and go watch the movie first, because it is a very, very great movie, in my opinion, anyways.
Hi, love.
I need you to hold it together for me.
What's happened?
I'll fix it. It'll all go back to normal. No matter what the situation is, you can make it good.
This is a joke to you.
No. Right now, nothing is a joke anymore. You make one little mistake. Eventually, cracks appear.
I'm not believing it.
I was 23 years old. Cracks appear. Listen to me, you piece of worthless shit.
Don't threaten me!
Then they will grow.
All right, so Locke premiered at the Venice International Film Festival back in 2013, and it debuted in cinemas in April 2014. A24 acquired the distribution rights to the movie during the 2013 Toronto International Film Festival, which was at the same film festival that it also acquired Enemy and Underneath the Skin, both movies which we've recently discussed in the series. So TIFF 2013 was a busy festival for A24, and I think marked a time that they kind of purchased this trilogy of pretty great movies that would define the studio in many ways. So my first fun fact about Locke, I have two fun facts. The first one is, even though Locke was purchased at TIFF 2013, it didn't actually screen during the festival, which is very odd and quite bonkers. But even more bonkers is the reason for that is still not really known. It's very ominous online of why that is. All the trades and stuff just go, it's for reasons unknown. It didn't actually screen at the festival. So there was quite a big bidding war for Locke, and that was purely based off of the hype that it got at Venice. So it clearly had a lot of legs to it, but for whatever reason didn't make it into TIFF, although Enemy did screen at TIFF, and I believe Under the Skin also did screen at TIFF. So Locke is directed by Stephen Knight, who is the creator behind one of the great gangster TV shows, Peaky Blinders. He also he's written a lot of screenplays, including David Cronenberg's Eastern Promises. And while Locke is a one-man show with only Tom Hardy seen on screen as Ivan Locke, the film also features vocal performances from Olivia Colman, Ruth Wilson, Andrew Scott, and Tom Holland. The film takes place in real time over 90 minutes in the car with Ivan. Over the course of his drive to a location that we first don't know about, Ivan receives 36 phone calls. He receives calls from his coworkers about a huge job that he's walked out on in favor of the trip that he's currently taking. He calls his wife and admits that he's been unfaithful to her, and he's dealing with the ensuing fallout with her and their two sons. And then we learn eventually that the journey that he's on is to meet his one-time lover at the hospital as she's preparing to give birth to their child. There's a lot in the film. It's quite a minimalistic movie. Cinematically speaking, it just takes place in a BMW, I think it was an X6 if I'm not mistaken. And it's all filmed down the M6 motorway in the UK. It was filmed over 6 days. My second fun fact about the movie is that Tom Hardy was actually sick during the filming of it, which is why Ivan is unwell throughout the whole film, the 90-minute film, because he really wasn't actually feeling well. So they, rather than delay the filming, they just added it into the character, which does add a bit of texture to the movie. Is just this idea of a man who's really, really knocked down and dealing with a lot of shit being thrown at him. So I really love this movie, as I've already said, but how do you guys rate Locke as a film? So Thomas, let's start with you. How do you feel about the movie?
You know, overall, I like the film. I think that this is a movie that benefits a lot from the single man performance. Again, kind of like I mentioned earlier, I really enjoy films that have limited casts and limited settings. Well, this is about as limited as you get. You know, you have this one man show, at least physically on screen. There are voice actors, but yeah, in this car, and that is like 99% of the movie. So aside from like the B-roll shots that get him into the car and that he exits on. But anyway, I like it overall, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy the minimalism of the film. I enjoyed how kind of all the details play out. And but I think there is a lot of conversation to be had about this character and the situation that he's in and how he chooses to handle it, which I am very excited to discuss more here.
Yeah, this is a movie I had seen once before. I guess first I want to say I really loved your fun facts. The first one was very interesting, and I wish there was a bit more information on that. And
weird,
the second
right?
fun, yeah. And the second fun fact I found especially funny since, he was actually sick. But there's a line in the movie where he's talking to his coworker or his boss or whatever, and he's like, "Why don't you just say you're sick?" He goes, "Because I'm not sick." As he's like, meanwhile, wiping his nose and like sneezing every few minutes. So that was a little funny and just a nice little aside there. I'm not sick. Yes, you are, Tom. You're very sick. I could tell. I'd seen this movie once before. I hadn't seen it before I was doing this way back at the start of this A24 project stuff when I first did the history of A24, and then I did my top 10 list, and I had Royce Benson come on and kind of made a list of notable ones I hadn't seen, and he was sort of talking about which ones might make his list, and Locke was one of the ones that he said he was pretty high on, so I watched it because of that. And that was the first time I watched it, so that was maybe 2 years ago, whenever that was. And I gotta say, it didn't quite hold my attention. It's so tough for a one-person show to like really grab your attention at the best of times. And this was a case where it wasn't the best of times, where I just kind of was just like, it's okay. Like, interestingly enough, both times I've watched it, I have found the most interesting aspects of it are the actual phone calls themselves, not Tom Hardy, but the other people on the phone lines. And I watched this, and I'm so fascinated by this construction project. That's the most interesting stuff to me, is how is this construction project going to get finished? And I don't know why, but for some reason, maybe it's Andrew Scott. I think Andrew Scott probably has the best performance in this movie. He just has such a good range in it, and I love his voice. He's got such a terrific voice. And it really played to his strengths. And so, once again, I'm just like, it's an okay movie. If you like Tom Hardy, you'll probably at least enjoy it somewhat because you get to stare at his beautiful face for an hour and a half. But, other than that, it's okay. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It just kind of sits there in that mushy middle of it's a fine movie for me.
Well, let's talk about why you're wrong. Because it is a great movie.
It's interesting listening to that reaction, because I think that I'm pretty sure the first time I watched it, I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention to it, and so I did go rewatch it again this week, and it'd been so long, it was kind of like watching it for the first time, and I think that I can understand why this movie probably appealed like in 2013. Because it's kind of unconventional with just the one setting, and the voices and him just kind of acting around voice actors. So I guess I can get the technical appeal about it, but I did spend some of this movie thinking, I think there's an interesting remake in here somewhere. Like, this seems like a proof of concept for something a little more robust.
Would you want like a remake in terms of, I guess, like a different setting, not a setting, but like, so say if we do it, say 10 years later, and like how the world is a little bit different now, or I mean like technology, or like what would fascinate you about a remake for this one?
I think that I want more context, right? Because I think that this movie, it does what it can with like explaining everyone's like role in his life, but like Dakota says, the construction project is fascinating. Like I really want to know more about this construction project. I think I want a better more, maybe a better fleshed out character out of Tom Hardy's character, Ivan, because there's things that he does in this movie that just, I don't think is as I don't know if I want to say believable, but there's things I would change about his character, I guess. And so there's it's just in its little things. And I don't even know if I'm saying they need to make a remake next year, right? Like, I think it's too soon. This movie still holds up. But like I spent a lot of the movie thinking there's a bigger movie here. There's a more robust movie here. And I enjoyed the experience. And I like minimalism storytelling like that. But yeah, I'm just like, you could probably do more with character development. You could probably do more with context and what's going on with the other characters. And I don't know, you can bring in, I don't know, maybe there's something that's happening on the radio or current events or something, right? Like, I think there's a lot that you could bring into this. And this was just a very minimal version of that.
Would you say that if it was maybe filming the other sides of the conversation, if we were seeing that, do you think that would maybe help round it out a bit better?
You know, I maybe, but at the same time, I think it would take away from that niche that I like, where it is just one person in this one setting, right? Like, there's another movie that I will bring up when I'm asked, that has a very similar concept, and that I did think, I wonder if this movie would benefit from like filming outside of this one environment that is taking place in. But no, I think artistically, I like that these filmmakers are taking on this challenge of being in this one space and staying in that one space.
So I'll say, I watched this movie in theaters, and I think that is very helpful, because this is one of those movies, because it is just Tom Hardy on screen. He's just in a setting. It's just in his car. You know, you talk about movies that require your attention. This is definitely one of those. Like, you can't, I think it even though it's not a big cinematic piece like a Top Gun or something that I think is greatly benefited from watching in theaters, I think that the reason to watch this one in theaters more if just your attention is solely focused on what's going on the screen. You don't take I hope you don't take your phone out, and like, you don't really talk with people. You're just focusing on that. And I find for me that really helped in terms of just immersing, that's the word, immersing myself into the story and what was going on, because there's just no distractions, and it's just me in a movie theater watching this 90 minutes play out. And so I can, as much as I kid, like, I can understand why I think for some people it doesn't work, because it is minimalist to an extreme, and that's not always going to be the case. And it depends too on like your headspace at the time. Like, if you're feeling a bit antsy or prickly at the time, then like this movie's not going to work for you. You kind of need to be in a proper mood for it. So I get what Dakota you're saying about just like how it just didn't grab you and how it didn't really take you. One thing though, Thomas, you brought up is about, you know, the filming style of it. It's just in there. So, you know, one of the major criticisms that people kind of give to this movie is whether or not criticisms, but just kind of a question that comes up from this movie is whether or not it's a stunt. Like, is it a cinematic stunt to just say you're just going to be focusing on one man in the car? That's it. There is the one scene where he gets in the car, but other than that, everything takes place in here, and you're going to get the phone calls in real time, and but we'll never see them, kind of thing. So for you guys, do you think that it is a stunt? Like, would you consider it to be a stunt, or do you think that it's executed well enough that it kind of supersedes the idea, the label of stunt?
I think if it was a stunt, they should have done it in one take.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's interesting.
That I think that would qualify as I don't think I ever got that impression. If it was intended to be a stunt, if it was just like the filmmaker saying, "Hey, let's just see if we can do a film," because I don't know how many. I guess I can't think of any other movies that before 2013 that take place this isolated. That made it to theaters. And I mean, I feel like my catalog is probably a little limited. So there probably are, but I don't know how many of those made it to the mainstream and were like commercially or critically successful. But I do think that it's, it sets the, at least in my mind, from my experience with filmmaking, it said you can do this and it can work, right? And I appreciate that. So yeah.
Dakota, how about you?
Yeah, I don't care for the term stunt when reviewing movies or being critical about movies. Like I really loved 1917. And I know a lot of people's complaints about, well, it's just a stunt. They're just making it look like it's a single take movie or things like that. And I dislike it because I feel like it's a disservice to the filmmakers who are making a conscious decision to try to separate themselves from other films and add a layer of interest to what they're trying to make. And so I would push back on Locke being a stunt movie as that as well, because, it's still very interestingly crafted, where how do you create drama out of a person sitting in a car only taking phone calls, where that's the only thing that you can go off of. And, they try to spruce it up a little bit by, having some, shots outside the car of lights flashing by, and every once in a while you'll see a police siren and you see the cop car drive by and things like that. You get some fancy shots and things like that, but for the most part it's pretty much cameras fixed on Tom Hardy's face, either from the front or from the side, and that's what you're going on. But I just I don't like the terminology stunt movie for that reason. But all that said, it's so tough because it's just a fine movie for me. It sort of reminds me of, I know, Thomas, you're trying to think of other movies that were similar. I didn't end up seeing this, but I remember hearing about it. There was this Steve Buscemi starring movie where it was him and one actress, and I can't remember who it was. And it was just the two of them in a single room or whatever it is, and that was the movie. But what they did was they filmed it 4 times, but each time they wore different outfit, so that way they could only use one take of this movie, one setup of this movie, and they couldn't edit, like, oh, your reaction was better, and the second time we did, well, we couldn't because we were wearing yellow shirts, and the first time we were wearing red shirts, sort of thing. So it just sort of reminds me of that a little bit, where you can only work with what you have here. And it seems like because of the fact that you only have, a camera in front of him and the side of him, and sometimes we'll get some shots from behind him, that's it. That's what you have. You can't go back and, you try to figure out ways to make it more interesting or fascinating or add more stuff to it. And I think that's where we get some of these, shots of outside the car. But other than that, you get what you get. There's nothing else there. You have to hope that Tom Hardy's performance is so captivating and so good that you don't have to worry about adding anything else in afterwards.
So I'm sure there's someone listening. I made the statement, like, I don't know what other movie happened this isolated. And I'm sure someone went to double check. And the movie that I'm thinking about, I thought came after this one, but I just went and fact checked. So the movie that I'm thinking of that I very often compare this movie to is the Rodrigo Cortez film with Ryan Reynolds, Buried.
Oh, Buried,
which apparently came out in 2010. I did not realize it came out that long ago. I'm like, oh yeah, that was just a couple years ago, But I very often think about these two films in tandem with each other. Buried is actually even more isolated than what film are we talking about?
Locke.
Locke. Sorry, I'm so unburied. But I always point to Buried as, first of all, the fact that Ryan Reynolds is a really good actor. Because in
when
Buried,
he wants to be,
when he wants to be, he's either a good actor when he wants to be, or he's Deadpool. So there's that.
Yes.
But in Buried, you don't get the benefit of, exterior shots. The whole movie literally happens in this like coffin, and that's all just Ryan Reynolds' performance. And I mean, I don't even think there are establishing shots. I'm pretty sure the whole film just happens in the coffin. And so I think about that, and I don't know, maybe that's more stunty than Locke is, but again, Buried works for me because it's a good performance, and it's an interesting story, and it's captivating. It's also a lot more thriller than Locke is. But yeah, that's just another example of a movie that I'm super attracted to because of the limited cast and the limited space, and it does a lot of similar things that Locke does, where Ryan Reynolds' character is just making calls and like trying to figure out how to get out of this box. So yeah, that's for anyone out there who was like, wait a minute, Buried came out before Locke. I'm like, okay, you're right.
For me, the concept of like a stunt, like I bristle at it as well, because I think it's almost lazy criticism to just be like, oh, it's like done in one shot, so therefore it must be like a stunt. Like, I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think that there's degrees of how well you do it. And I personally, I think Locke does it really well. There is one movie that I'll bring up as an example that came out recently, and it's called Night Ride. I don't know if either of you guys caught it. It's like a fairly small movie that came out of Belfast. The city, not like a film festival, like it was actually shot in Belfast. And it is very, very similar to Locke in that it takes place all in a car, and he gets phone calls throughout, and he's like a drug dealer that is doing his last, like it's that kind of stereotypical movie of like, it's his last go, it's his last ride, like this is the last job that he's going to do, and then he retires and he goes live like a straight life after that kind of thing. So, you know, in that movie, it is interesting that you said that, Thomas, about like if it was done in one take. So that movie is done in one take, and it genuinely is done in one take. And he does get out of the car at times. And part of the production notes of that was the car gets pulled over by the cops at one point, and that was actually real. Like the cops genuinely pulled him over, just to, I think, just check. Nothing happened to him. Like they just checked his license and then they let him move on. But that made it into the movie because they were just doing one take. To me, the difference between Locke and something like Night Ride is Locke, there's so many interesting things within the storytelling and the, you know, like we were talking about the construction project, and then obviously the whole, you know, the deal with him going to, which we'll get into a little bit later, but like his not girlfriend, but the, you know, he's got a new baby on the way who's the product outside of his marriage. And there's interesting threads in there. Whereas Night Ride, the most interesting thing about that movie was that it was done in one take, that it was, you know, kind of a single one-man show, even though he does do other things. But like, that's the most interesting thing about the movie. And to me, when you can say that, the most interesting about the thing about the film is the fact that it was one take, or the fact that it is done in one set location. That to me is when it kind of goes into stunt territory, or like trope territory, I suppose. So you're kind of doing it just for the sake of doing it, but you don't have a story to back it up. And that for me is kind of the differentiation between a movie done well that uses a quote unquote cinematic stunt, and then one that doesn't do it well. But like, there are ways to supersede that idea of a stunt, if that makes sense. Did either of you see that movie? I don't think you guys did.
No,
it's
I did not.
Small.
But I kind of want to now, so that so that I can criticize it. No, I actually like 100% agree with what you're saying. Ultimately, like any movie that has any style to it has to, for me, have a good story to support it, right? And so when you lack a good story, then I have to look at, okay, why is this movie in existence, right? So you look at things like the Transformers movies, you know, those are stunt films in the sense that they're just blockbusters, right? They don't have good stories, not even slightly, but they are meant to be a blockbuster film, and that's the stunt, right? There's not a good story. It comes out in the summer, lots of CGI, like that I would call a stunt because it doesn't have the story to support support the movie. And so I agree with you. I do think Locke has it has character development. It has interesting threads in the narrative, and multiple threads in the narrative. And so, you know, he's juggling a bunch of different things at the same time. There is definitely a story here, which I appreciate, and is one of the reasons I really enjoy it, because you're trying to figure out how these stories are going to unfold as more details are revealed or as new things happen. And the fact that it happens in this car doesn't take away from the story. And so, yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying.
One thing, I mean, with this movie, you guys both have mentioned it. It's like, in order to pull off something like this, you need a really good performance. You need somebody to ground the movie and to kind of, to uplift the fact that it is static, right? Like, we're just in one setting. So you have to get something to capture you from, and that's all on Tom Hardy's shoulders. I like Tom Hardy. I think he's a good actor. I do think he does have a tendency at times in some of his performances to kind of overdo it a little bit. He can be a little bit much. And so when you do come down to, well, it's just a one-man performance, it's just him on screen, you kind of go, well, we don't know. I mean, at the time, I don't think I had many opinions on Tom Hardy, because I think I'd only seen him in Inception when I first saw this movie. I don't know if I really saw him in anything else. But, oh no, Bronson as well, but he overacts a little bit in Bronson.
Oh my goodness! Did Inception come out before this movie? How did all these movies I love come out before this movie?
Inception's 2010, and I could be wrong, but I think Bronson is 2007 or 8, somewhere in that kind of territory. So he was well known, like, to the British public at that point. But I do think now he has a bit more reputation of maybe like a scene chewing kind of guy. But how did his performance play out for the two of you? So Dakota, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest Tom Hardy fan in general. I certainly like some of the movies that he's been in. You know, in Inception, I don't think he has a ton to do in that movie. He just is one of the many people in the ensemble. He was really good in Mad Max Fury Road. His Bane was sort of whatever. So it's a little tough to because I do agree he often does sort of chew the scenery and overact, or he does the complete opposite and tries to do as little as possible. And for the most part, I would say he tries to do as little as possible in this movie, except for a few key moments. And I think those moments where he goes really big are also what doesn't work for me. I would say in particular, you know, there's this conceit of, you know, he's doing all these phone calls, but then also he's having this conversation with his father. We don't know if he's deceased or not. I can't remember, but either way, his father was not present in his life. And we learn that he eventually showed up when he was, I presume, an adult, and tried to have a relationship with his son that he never cared about having one with earlier. And that's why he's doing all of this. And so he's having this conversation with his dad of being like, I'm not like you. I'm going to be there for the kid, even if it ruins my whole life and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to let him know that I'm there. And ironically, those scenes work the least for me. Every time he's talking to his father, I completely lose interest. They're just telegraphing too much. They're trying to over-explain everything. I like that there was some mystery in some of these phone calls he was having, like, ooh, what is his relationship with this woman? Ooh, what's happening with his wife? And why does he care so deeply that he's willing to throw away his entire career and all this sort of stuff? I found very, very interesting and fascinating. But every time he was talking to his imaginary father in the back seat, I just feel like they were just telegraphing way too hard and over-explaining. And, you know, it's one of those things where in movies, you show, you don't tell. And unfortunately, in a movie like this, you can't show anything because it's just in a car, so you're only telling. But how do you tell in a way that is closer to showing as opposed to just telling? And I feel like that's just the telling part. So it's tough. I feel like he's okay, but like I said at the top, I found the phone calls the most interesting stuff. I really liked what Andrew Scott was doing. I thought the conversations with Olivia Colman, who was, you know, not his lover, because he does not love her. He makes that very clear that he does not love her because it was one night. They don't even know each other. His sexual partner and the mother of his child. I thought those conversations were very interesting. Obviously, Ruth Wilson playing his wife was able to kind of ground the story of like, no, this is a real situation that's happening, and he is willing to kind of throw away his entire marriage to make what he believes is the right choice. So I found all these phone calls so fascinating, and I love them, and I wish there was more of that. I could keep listening to him talking to Andrew Scott explaining how to pour concrete for the rest of the movie.
I really like the ones with the sons as well. Like, those broke my heart, because it's like, he is, I mean, and that gets to, that was actually like, we'll just kind of blend those two discussion points in, because I did want to talk about the scenes with his, quote, like his dad in the back seat or whatever, and how those scenes worked for you guys. But I think that idea of like when his sons are talking to him, and it's this weird like paradox of, on one hand, he thinks he's doing right by this girl he doesn't know and who's about to like basically ruin his family. I shouldn't say she's ruining his family. It's his decision that ruined it. But, you know, he's going to do what he thinks is the right thing to help, you know, and to be the father. He doesn't want to be the deadbeat father that his father was. But in doing so, he kind of becomes that, because, you know, you hear the heartbreak in the voice of, you know, Tom Holland. It's just like, are you coming home? Like, can you please come home? Like, mom's crying in the bathroom. Like, what's going on? And those things just tore me up, because I'm like, you think you're doing the honorable thing by this woman you slept with one time. You don't even know her. But in doing so, you are literally like damaging your children at this point, your other kids who you do also have an obligation to. So, but Thomas, how'd that work for you? How'd the, you know, Tom Hardy's performance, those scenes with the father in the back seat and him going all ranty on this figment of his imagination?
Yes, I have thoughts about this, and I'm sorry. There's some noise happening outside of my studio, so I apologize about that if that gets into the recording. But I just watched the movie this week and completely forgot about the scenes where he's talking to his imaginary father. Like, Dakota said that, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess that did happen, didn't it?"
Well, they're so forgettable for the most part.
It's the weakest part of the movie, I think. I personally think it's the weakest part of the movie.
I agree. I didn't care for that, and I also do like the notion of the mystery. Although I think at the same time it might have been necessary to help justify why he's throwing everything away. Like, he feels so compelled about how he felt about his father's presence in his life or absence in his life, that he's making this very extreme decision to to jeopardize his current life in order to do what he thinks is honorable. So, you know, it's almost a necessary evil to explain why, because I think that one of the things that kind of bothered me about the film is how he handled doing this honorable decision. I think that even more problematic than him talking to his imaginary father is him trying to be rational with the wife that he just announced he had an affair with someone else and is having their kid right now. He approaches the conversations with his wife as if she's supposed to behave rationally in this situation. Things like, you know, honey, I want to talk about this. Maybe we can go get dinner and have a conversation. And I'm just like, bruh, that is not the level she's on right now. I do not think she wants to go on a date with you right now, you know? And so,
also, like, the shitty bit of hearing this news from your husband as he's on the phone. Like, you know, like, you're not even doing this in person. Like, you have a whole family with this kid, with this guy.
Exactly, right? And I think that that's the biggest problem for me is how, I guess answering the question about Tom Hardy's performance, I think he does, what he does with the material. I was actually thinking back, and I'm like, wait, which roles do I like overly like Tom Hardy in? And I think I just like, mediocrely like him, and like I know him, I recognize his name, but then I when I think about like, okay, what movie was he like stand out in? And
his movies are often good, but not usually because of him. Like,
right.
If you're saying, oh, there's a new Tom Hardy movie, we're like, oh, a new Christopher Nolan movie?
Which, by the way, Dark Knight Rises came out before Locke. You guys, I feel so old right now.
It did, yeah. This was, 2012 Dark Knight Rises, isn't it?
Dark Knight Rises. Wow. I just cannot believe so much came out before 2013. But yeah, so I do remember spending like every conversation he had with his wife thinking, look, dude, realistically, you've had time to process this, and I know you're in a rational state right now, or at least you think you're in a rational state, but I don't know what part of that rational state you think you're in makes you think that your wife is going to be in a rational state. So like, you're on your way to the birth of a child that she has no idea about. And it's just now, like, she has like less than 90 minutes to process this brand new news that you've had for, months now. At least I assume that's what the case is. But I think that is just the most problematic thing for this movie with me is I wish that he had a more believable interaction with his wife, because I think his wife reacts appropriately.
Yes.
Very reasonably, right? Considering the circumstances, like, yes, that is what I would expect from someone who just got this news, who is just now trying to process this. And honestly, I think she comes to conclusions a lot quicker than other people might. So there's that to, to her defense. But yeah, he's just calm, cool, and collected. Like, honey, like, let's just talk it out. Like, no, not even let's just talk it out. I'll talk about it when I get home after my baby is born. like that is just not how that's supposed to happen. And so, yeah, anyway, that's where I am about the material.
See, I would say, I think, even though it's like you wish he would react better, I don't know how out of character it would be for a guy like to do something like that, to just like in their brain, because like you said, they've already reconciled it in their head. They're like, listen, like, I messed up. I got to go do right by this person, or not I don't think it's do right by the woman, but it's do right by the child who's being born, right? Like that's who he wants to do right by. Mm-hmm. And in his head, he's just like, yeah, like I this is what I got to do. And, he's got that very kind of typical, like, I screwed up, so I'm going to pretend that everything is like kind of a bit in denial almost, and being like, hey, mm-hmm. like, babe, like, why are you acting like that? Like, what's your problem? Right. Like, calm down a little bit. And I could totally see somebody in his position kind of acting like that. I don't agree with it, and I think he's like scum for doing that. But I don't know if I would agree with saying like it's what's the word? Like, it's unrealistic. Like, I could see somebody reacting like that. It's just I would never want somebody to react like that, because it's heartless and it's incredibly cruel to do.
And maybe that's what I want more context. Like, what kind of person is he outside of this car? Because I think the thing that cued me in on how selfish he's being about the situation is he says the phrase what I want, like, multiple times to his wife. What I want to do is I want to sit down. I want to talk with you. I want, like, bro, shut up, dude. Like, you need to cool it on the I wants. Okay. You might want to figure out what she wants and maybe work that angle, because the I wants isn't working for you. So I think that was, and I don't know, maybe that's just a small detail that I picked up on, but like every time he said I wanted, I just cringed. Like, dude, this is not about what you want right now, at least with the conversation with her.
But I think that like adds to who he is, like who Ivan Locke is like, this man is just thinking about himself, really. Like, in a sense, it's that kind of moral dilemma of like, do you tell somebody that, you hurt them years later when it is no benefit to them? Do you know what I mean? Like, but it only unleashing the truth will absolve yourself of any guilt, burden that you have on yourself, right? But in doing so, you're going to hurt somebody else quite a bit, and for no reason, right? I mean, this is a bit different because you are obviously dealing with a child, and you can't really keep a kid secret, or you shouldn't. You shouldn't keep love child secret. But yeah, I think in terms of the idea of with the whole sequence of the dad in the back seat, and it's like, I think I don't have a problem with the concept of like his deadbeat dad is his justification for wanting to go to the hospital and be there for the kid, for the new child. But I think I just don't like the execution of it. I'm with you guys on that one. Like, I don't think that whole bit was done very well. And I don't think that Tom Hardy in particular kind of delivered those scenes in a way that was because it feels really out of place in the movie too. Like, in the whole movie, he's so chill and like, so whatever. But in these, like, he just is kind of ranting at nobody. And I know that that's supposed to kind of show like the degradation of his brain in that sense, kind of the other side of the coin. But that didn't work for me at all. I think it was a bit much, and a bit like Tom Hardy's scene chewing that I'm not a massive fan of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like, and this is just kind of the thought process that I'm on, thinking more about like who Ivan is and how he behaves. And it's something that I look at in films to kind of determine how much I care about the story, is the idea of consequences, right? I think that compelling stories have consequences, and you have to, each story will deal with those consequences however they're going to. But I don't know if I got enough consequence for his character. Maybe that's why I feel so offended at how he talks to his wife in this, because and we're in talking spoilers, so ultimately his wife again, very quickly comes to the conclusion, and good for her, that, hey, this is over. Don't come home. We're getting a divorce. We'll have, arrangements for the kids, to see the kids. And, ultimately that's the conclusion, to come to, at least for her. But that's the biggest consequence. And he is entirely unfazed by it. Not entirely unfazed. Like he wants to maintain the relationship, but at least as far as like his demeanor in the car, he's so elsewhere that particular consequence is like a little like footnote on other things that he's actually a lot more invested in. And so that consequence didn't hit with me. The idea of, oh, well, it looks like they're going to, go through with the divorce and his home life is ruined, right? Like, he doesn't seem as fazed about it as he is with the kid that's being born and the construction project that's going on. And so it doesn't hit me. Like, does he, like, where is the remorse? Where is the, like, ultimately, what is the consequence? What is his ultimate retribution, I guess, or whatever word I'm looking for, to this whole story? Because the way that it ends, he almost like rides off into, I mean, it's nighttime, so there's no sunset, but he just kind of rides off to, his future that is the current state of things. And I don't know, has he grown at all as a character out of this?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because I feel like the natural conclusion to this movie, if we were to imagine what happens next to all these characters, is obviously he's been fired. He's going to have a hard time finding a job in his field. His wife is probably going to kick him out. He's probably going to have a strained relationship with his sons, who maybe don't understand the rationale of his decision making. And from there, you're just basically left with a guy that believes in his convictions so strongly, he's willing to throw everything away, which that really isn't growth or learning from your mistakes. That's kind of being stubborn. Mm-hmm. And where do you see Ivan Locke going after this? Who is he different from at the beginning of the movie? Because, the only time we really see him making any sort of decision is at the very beginning. He gets in his car after he's done work, and he's about to turn left, and he's sitting there at the red light, and then it turns green, and he gets a honk to go. He decides to turn right. That's the only decision he really makes throughout the whole movie, where he actually has to think about what he wants to do with his life. And he believes so strongly in his convictions that, damn everything else, he's willing to throw away his career, his marriage, his children. He doesn't even care for this woman at all. So it's not like he's leaving his wife to, start a new family or anything like that. He is going to be completely alone in this world after this movie is over.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that I feel like he thinks it's heroic.
I think
which
just makes me even more concerned about the character development here. Like, dude, maybe there are consequences. Maybe I just don't feel the consequences because he thinks that that it's a heroic or an honorable thing to do, and I don't know if I want him feeling honorable. I want him feeling how his wife wants him to feel. Right? It's like, this is not okay.
I think that kind of raises the interesting aspect of like the ambiguity that this film has within it, and especially with the ending, because you have to kind of come up with your own ending. Like, maybe does his wife actually take him back, and they kind of figure it out, right? They just work it out, like a lot of couples do and a lot of families do, especially because they have children. Or does he really is alone, like Dakota said? Like, is he alone? Is he just kind of on this misguided perception of heroicism? Is he now just going to lead a very shitty life, like from here on out, kind of thing? And I find when movies end off in that kind of ambiguous tone, it is interesting because it's up to you to decide whether you're not. And it is more true to life in many ways, because like in life, nothing is really wrapped up in a neat bow at the end where we kind of figure it out. Like, it's just going to keep going. So after the camera, everything fades to black. It's like, these people, even though they're fictional, it's like, you can imagine they just keep going. They just, we aren't really privy to what happens to them. So Thomas, obviously, you would rather have seen like some sort of consequence, some sort of something to happen to him to show like either some growth or, some stakes, basically, and kind of in a emotional stakes, I suppose, rather than physical.
Right. And maybe this is just me being selfish. Like, you need to make the movie that I want you to make, But I think for a more satisfying movie going experience, I would have liked something to happen to make him question, what he is considering honorable. Because ultimately, like, we know he thinks he's doing the right thing. And I can, with the whole backstory about his dad and everything, like, I can understand it. It's one of those things that I can understand, even though I don't agree with, but also, like, I want that to be questioned. Ambiguity. I'm okay with ambiguity. I don't mind, like, coming up with my own. It makes podcasts like this so very interesting to have conversations about, right? So I don't mind the ambiguity of the ending, but I guess I also kind of, like, thematically speaking or morally speaking, like, when there's something that we can all kind of agree is morally questionable, that maybe he has an opportunity to have those same questions. And I don't think this movie opened that opportunity, or at least the narrative as it is opened that opportunity for him to really think, like, am I actually doing the right thing? What are the repercussions? Like, I feel honorable in this moment, but, like, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, like, what are the long-term effects of this decision? And I guess that just kind of goes to how isolated the story is, being that it's happening in this car. And I guess I didn't even realize it's very slice of life. So I appreciate that. That's kind of cool. But yeah, I want him to question himself. I want him to have some like, just some moment to think, like, maybe I'm not right here. Like, maybe this isn't the right thing to do, or maybe I should reconsider. Right. But again, I think that's the movie I would make. Right. I think, selfishly speaking, when I have a narrative experience, I want there to be more, layers to how a character is perceiving their reality.
All right, so that's all the kind of discussion things I want to talk about, but was there anything that I missed that the two of you want to discuss about this movie?
I feel like we're spending the duration of the film is how long we spent talking about it, which is kind of cool. Right?
No, I would say I feel like we kind of hit all the big points that I wanted to talk about. Did anyone have any favorite voice actor that they liked in all of these? Since I feel like I've been talking about that.
I liked Ruth Wilson. I thought she was very, very, very good. And it's like, to hear, like, the conflict and the heartbreak and the anger and everything from her. Like, we don't even see her face, but you can imagine, like, what she looks like just the kind of torture that she's under. And I think that they're all very good. Like, I agree with you too, Dakota. Like, Andrew Scott's amazing in it as well. But I really liked Ruth Wilson's performance.
Mm-hmm. I will second that. Ruth Wilson and Andrew Scott, both of those were the highlights for me. I think that there's just a lot of depth to how they had to respond to Ivan's, behavior and his way of going about this evening. So definitely a lot of emotional value to Ruth Wilson's performance, especially with her character's predicament. And I don't know, like, there was a lot of times I'm like, no, get back on the phone with your wife so that she can, like, really give it to you. Like, I need her to yell at you some more. So there's that. And yeah, I wasn't, like, I like Olivia Colman, but I don't know if I cared for the over-attached character she played. I don't know if there was enough reasoning for that. Maybe they could have gone in a different direction. But yeah, great voice acting overall from everyone, and I think that it helps make this movie as engaging as it is.
All right, so why don't we move into our game section of our A24 Retrospective series, and that is We pick a movie that is going to be a double feature that we think would be a good double feature for the movie that can't be an A24 movie. And then, of course, we have the Would You Rather. So let's start with the double feature. Thomas, why don't you go first? So what movie would you pair with Locke that is a not a A24 movie?
Right. So earlier I mentioned one film that like I said, when I think of Locke, I think of Buried, just because, again, of the isolated nature, and Buried being even more isolated than Locke. So if you want that, like, I mean, I think that Buried does a really good job of having that like claustrophobic kind of feel to it. And so I originally was going to say that. But then I thought about another film that I went and revisited this week and thought, you know what? And I actually did double feature these. I watched Locke and then thought, I should go watch this one and see if if it's a good match. But I would actually say a good double feature with Locke is probably Phone Booth.
Yes. Yes.
And I like that movie a lot. It's not as isolated as Locke is. It does do the filming outside situations or outside calls that he's making. So it does it doesn't just stay in the phone booth. There is other cinematography happening here. But most of the movie happens on this block where this phone call is happening with this psycho stalker killer guy. And on top of that, there's also kind of the theme of infidelity involved. Even though it's not tangible, it's kind of like emotional cheating that the main character there is accused of. And so you kind of have that theme going as well, but there's much more character development, I think, in Phone Booth. But I enjoyed double featuring that, and I think that there's enough in common that they could be a good double feature.
Nice. It's a great movie. Underrated Colin Farrell, in my opinion. Yeah. And Dakota, how about you?
Yeah, I remember being a big fan of that one when I was younger. I haven't revisited it in years. I probably should. This was an interesting one because I feel like you can go in multiple different directions of how to approach it. At first, I was trying to come up with a movie pairing that saw a character who makes a choice that they know isn't the best option, but still goes through with it. And I really struggled, and I was like, well, I was thinking maybe something like Watchmen, but I was like, it doesn't really work in the same way. But, I instead went with, much like Thomas, a one-person film, and I don't know if there will ever be another time for me to chat about this movie, and that is the J.C. Chandor movie, All Is Lost, which is about Robert Redford alone on a boat who has to weather a storm, quite literally and figuratively, and it's just him on a boat, and there's almost no dialogue, and it's just him trying to survive on a boat. And so I like the concept of they're both in vehicles, they're both alone. He's dealing with memories of his recently deceased wife, so there's the past angle that's coming up into present and all that sort of stuff. So I like that concept of the one person movie, and so that's the direction that I went with. Have either of you seen that movie?
No.
I have not.
I'm not a big Redford person, so I should. But
I am.
I'm just not.
Well, J.C. Chandor, the director, has made 3 movies so far, or 4 movies so far, and the first 3 I was absolutely in love with, and one of them is actually an A24 movie, A Most Violent Year, the Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain movie. But he also made the very excellent sort of Wall Street drama thriller Margin Call, that I really love. But then he did the god-awful movie Triple Frontier, and I don't know if I've forgiven him for that yet.
Hey, everyone's got to get paid at some point. Can't blame him. Those are both really good. I should probably check that Redford movie out, because I have heard of it, and I heard people saying it was really, really good. But yeah, I don't know. He doesn't do it for me. I'm just saying. I was pretty close to you guys in terms of going for movies that were single setting, kind of isolation. Mine has more than one character in it, and I went for I thought about Phone Booth, and I thought about Buried as well, because I think that those two actually work really well with Locke as well. But I went with a Richard Linklater movie from 2001 called Tape, and it is Ethan Hawke, Robert Sean Leonard, and Uma Thurman, and they're in a motel room. And they play 3 high school students who kind of have it out with each other in terms of like a thing that happened in high school that they're rehashing. So I don't want to give too much away about it, but and it's just the three of them in the room, and there's it's very, very dialogue heavy, and them talking about different kind of morality choices and concepts of like forgiveness and justice and things like that. It's a really, really great movie, and it's got a bit of kind of psychological tension in it as well, which Locke doesn't really do, but it's similar to Locke in that it's just kind of a bit of a more quiet but very intense type of movie. Have either of you guys seen
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah.
I have not either, but I am thoroughly intrigued. This sounds really good. And, I think ultimately what Locke is missing is the psychological thriller. Like, I just needed what we paired with Locke are a bunch of psychological thrillers. And I think that's just the component Locke is missing.
Yeah. About like a sci-fi factor as well. Just like aliens come down all of a sudden. That'd be great.
There you go.
All right, that's cool. I was actually kind of thinking we would have chosen. We're still on a streak, Dakota, of nobody choosing the same movie for double feature, and I was very sure that we would kind of, because I thought it would phone booth or buried, because those make sense to me of double features. But I'm glad we got three different choices. All right, so let's do Would You Rather. Dakota, we'll start with you.
Okay, so would you rather have every important phone call you ever have to be answered while driving, or the only way to get sober, whatever substances you're choosing, is to run?
This is a good one.
So you can only answer the phone in your car for important phone calls, whether it's work, personal, whatever, or you've had a couple drinks and whatever, or you've gotten a little stoned, whatever your preference is, your vice is, you have to run.
My question is not nearly that interesting. So
Thomas, which one? What would you pick?
Just because I'm kind of I'm thinking about summer and getting in shape, and I do like drinking, so I feel like I'm hitting two birds with one stone if I do the running to get sober. I can get fit and get sober at the same time. I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah, even if you've maybe had a couple too many old fashions and you end up having to throw up a bit.
Yeah, it's just less calories.
I'm going the other way. I hate running. There are things that I really hate in life, and running is one of them. I can't stand it. Running is this. I never understood the people who are like, oh, I have a runner's high. It's so I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't understand it. Like, I've tried so hard to, I've run a half marathon because I thought I'm gonna chase this runner's high. I'm like, I don't understand what you guys are talking about. So no, I am.
You'd rather just a regular high?
You know what? We don't need to talk about that. But all I'm saying is I am past the age now where I'm done trying to chase this idea that I'm a runner. I'm not a runner. I'm good. It's fine. I love driving. So I'll take phone calls in my car all the time. No big deal. Gas is pretty expensive these days. So I might need to get like an electric car if I can afford one. But yeah, I'm going with every phone call, important call in a car.
Rachel, you're not wrong. Running is awful. I hate it.
So bad.
It is.
I just don't get these people running around and they look so happy. I'm like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, if you see me running, I'm probably going to look annoyed.
Yes, and as you should. See, the people who look pained and are just like angry, I'm like, I get it. I do understand. And I get that you're doing it for like cardiovascular health, and I respect that. It's those ones who are like smiling. I'm like, get out of here. What's wrong with
Psychos.
you? They are. There's something wrong with them. Oh, God. Dakota, which one would you choose for your own?
I'd probably go with Thomas and go for running. The reason why is I don't mind running. It's usually hard for me to actually, convince myself to do it. But once I'm actually out there, I don't mind it as much. But as far as when I'm driving, I much rather listen to music or podcasts. I don't want to have a conversation. I'm just trying to get from point A to point B. I don't want to converse with someone. So yeah.
Oh,
that's it.
That actually makes my question a little bit more interesting.
All right, Thomas, why don't we go with you then? What's your would you rather?
It's really, I mean, I should have been more creative with this, but I'm like, I don't know. The movie's minimalist. My question's just
a tricky
minimalist.
It was tricky, yeah.
I guess, if you're in a situation where you're on a late night drive, for a couple hours, would you rather talk on the phone or listen to music?
Yeah, I actually thought about this. I genuinely thought about this for a question, actually. I was like, maybe like music or podcast. That's what I was going to go with. But
right. Yeah. I guess we know Dakota's answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very easy. Yeah.
I think I'd go with music as well. I would probably prefer just listening to whatever it is that I feel like listening. Although, have you guys ever got those moments where it's like you just can't find the thing that you want to listen to, and it's very frustrating? Mm-hmm. Yep. And you're just like, you spend 20 minutes just like, I don't know what I want. Like, I don't know if I want to do podcast right now, if I want to music, like what kind of music. That kind of frustrates me a little bit. But I think I'd rather go music over having to converse with another human being.
Which is fascinating. I mean, I mean, I've done long drives plenty of times and I do listen to music, but I don't know. I mean, as you guys may have picked up on this podcast, I like to talk. Like a bunch. And so I don't know. I think talking like with the right conversation and the right person, like, I mean, I have kind of a set of friends or people that I, kind of have on, on like my speed dial if I'm driving. So yeah, I would probably have a conversation and talk, if that was an option.
You ever talk to yourself in the car? I do that. So just to clear the air, like just to make it more comfortable for you. I definitely talk to myself in the car sometimes.
That's funny. No, I actually don't. I mean, I do a lot of thinking. And yeah, but I don't think I talk to myself. The one thing I do though, I don't talk to myself, but let me tell you, my carpool karaoke is next level awful, but I think it's like grade A concerts. Okay.
I am basically Adele when I'm like in the car, man. Like, my God, I'm just such a great singer. It's unbelievable. Like, last night I was driving home and I was like cranking Aaliyah actually. And I'm like, I am pretty much Aaliyah. Like, this is just as good as she did. It was fantastic.
Damn, if only I could have been a fly in that car.
No, even flies aren't allowed in the car when I
exactly.
am singing.
This is a very personal moment. It's just between me and me. That's all it is.
Yeah, I'm telling you, in my head, I have the light shows, I have the audience, I have the microphone, I'm doing a dance routine. Like, it is a full production in my head.
I'm with you on that one. Yes, and they're excellent. Like, and you don't have to pay for the ticket. It's
right.
It's amazing. I get you. All right, I went kind of similar with Dakota and in terms of like, I guess similar to both of you, but like, so I said, you guys remember those stories of people who hop onto a plane and they have no Wi-Fi on the plane, they get fired when they land, and everybody on social media knows this. So
yep.
My question to you guys is, would you rather get a call from your boss and you have a 90-minute drive, and over the course of that 90 minutes, you're basically in the process of getting fired. The same thing that happens to Ivan Locke throughout the film. Mm-hmm. Or would you rather hop onto a plane, there's no Wi-Fi, and you, after a 90-minute or whatever flight, you land, and then your phone blows up because you just found out you got fired? Which firing would you rather?
That's interesting. First of all, why doesn't the plane have Wi-Fi?
Because it's 2013.
That's true.
Wi-Fi is still a relatively new thing on a plane.
It is, which I think is so unfortunate.
Well, it would be the same as now, where they pay you pay $20 to get access to the Wi-Fi, and then it's down.
And you pay $20 to find out you got fired.
Yes, I guess that's true too. Dakota, this is actually one I have to think about. Dakota, I'll let you go first on this one.
This is an interesting one. I think I would rather the plane option, where it just kind of like comes to you, because at least in that way, it's sort of like ripping off a Band-Aid. Whereas if you're on the phone and you're going through with it and you're like, fighting for your life, and you're like, no, but what about this? But what about that? And they're like, well, it's above my pay grade. I can't. Oh, my hands are tied. All this sort of like nonsense that you hear from corporate BS, blah, blah, blah. And just like that pit in your stomach of, you already know that the decision's been made and the paperwork's probably been filed. but still they're having to go through this song and dance of explaining it to you, and you're like, well, what can I, do better for next time? Like that, whatever, like no one really cares. And, I'm making a motion with my hand that no one can see or hear. But
this sounds personal, Dakota. This sounds like we're getting into something really personal here.
Do we need to talk about something?
You all right?
Is there a time?
I have been let go once before, and having that meeting was definitely crappy. So yeah, I would rather just the Band-Aid be ripped off and be like, this is what happened.
Interesting.
Sure. Thomas?
Yeah. Oh, this is so interesting. I don't know, because I like to think I'm charismatic enough to keep my job.
That's true, actually. Like, if you think you can do it. Yeah, that's true.
If I think I can do it. But you know what, to be fair, so I also have been laid off before. And so it is not a fun conversation. In fact, my strategy in this situation was it was actually a sales strategy. It was just to not talk. We just sat there. I swear we sat there for 15 minutes and nobody said anything, because I'm waiting for them to say something. They're waiting for me to say something, and we're all just waiting for this to end. And I'm hoping that my silence changes their mind, or their silence makes me, end it. And we just sat there silently. It was a very awkward meeting. So it was very.
That should be a movie. That should be Locke. That's the movie there.
It was very. I learned this in sales. If you just don't say anything, then the person that you're not saying anything to will get uncomfortable enough to say whatever they have to break the silence. And so it's a great strategy until both of you are doing it, and then it doesn't work. So with that experience in mind, I guess I will have to take the plane option, but I also kind of need to know where I'm going, because if I'm going to like Hawaii or to like somewhere tropical, then it is a much easier bit of news to take.
That's true. That's the end destination does really matter.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Thomas, for coming on. I really enjoyed chatting with you. This is a really fun episode. You should come back.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, let's do this again. I like talking, so like on the phone when I'm driving, let's do it.
But yes, thank you, Thomas. It was a real pleasure. Where can people find your work, and where are you working on right now?
Oh, that's right. Yes. So you can find my content, reviews, interviews, things like that at thisisforreal.com. For real, of course, spelled FORREEL. You can also follow For Real on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at This Is For Real. I'm pretty sure that's still that thing, handle. The links are on the website though, so you can always go through there to find that. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at BeingTSJ. And I guess I have Tribeca coming up. So I'll be doing some Tribeca coverage. I have some interviews lined up. There's a couple movies that I'm in the process of reviewing, and a few more that I want to watch during the festival through their at-home platform. So yeah, Tribeca, that is going to be on the website here in the next couple of weeks. So subscribe and follow that.
Excellent. Well, in case you got any of your social media handles wrong, I am going to link to them in the show notes, and I will verify that they are correct.
You are such a
so that way people
lifesaver.
can find your work there.
The magic of the description section. I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Rachel, where can people find you and your work?
I can go to rachelkh.com, and my Twitter is _RachelKH. I'm trying to think if I had anything new. I might have, but I'm drawing a blank right now. So
that's all
go
right.
there. I'm sure there's something new there that I'm just forgetting about. I don't know.
Well, you can follow this show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at contrazoompod. If you've seen Locke, let us know your thoughts. Send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music, and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. Thanks for checking us out.